Welcome back to the Daily Bible Summary. You should have read chapter 10 by now, so let's take a look at some things that we can learn here. First, we note that yes, this chapter is a lot of names, and much like chapter 5, it would be easier to pass over it. But we should take time to read it and notice why it's here. Moses, writing this book, is explaining to Israel not just how man was created and presenting the problem of sin along with God's judgment on it, but also where did all the nations that are going to be around them come from. In this chapter, we see a semi-detailed and yet a very brief account of where the earth was populated and by whom and where they came from. This is the third of 10 generations in Genesis. It begins with, "These are the generations of the sons of Noah, Shem, Ham, and Japheth." This table of nations shows how the world was populated or repopulated after the flood, tracing 70 nations back to Noah's 3 sons. As you read, there are a lot of names, some of people, some of cities, some we don't know, and some we don't even know how to pronounce very well. But many of these names would have been very familiar to Israel. Japheth's descendants spread to the coastlands and became the peoples of the north and west. His sons included Gomer, Magog, Madai, Javan, Tubal, Meshach, and Tiras. From Javan came Tarshish, a name Israel would recognize as a distant trading part somewhere in the area of Spain. Do you remember when Jonah was trying to flee? He was trying to flee to Tarshish. These people spread to the coastland, each with their own language, by their clans in their nations. Now notice the mention of different languages. This will be explained further in chapter 11 when we get to the Tower of Babel. Ham's line gets the most attention, and for good reason. These are the nations Israel would interact with most and often as enemies. Ham's sons were Cush, Egypt, or in some versions Mizraim, Put, and Canaan. From Cush came Nimrod, described as a mighty man and a mighty hunter before the Lord. Nimrod founded several cities, but you likely recognize Babel, later called Babylon, and Nineveh, cities that would loom large in Israel's history as oppressive empires. From Egypt, or Mizraim again, as some versions say, came several peoples, including the Philistines, and the Philistines, of course, would be Israel's constant adversaries in the land. From Canaan came Sidon, the Phoenicians and Heth, the Hittites, along with the Jebusites, the Amorites, the Girgasites, the Hivites, and others. These are the very peoples that God would command Israel to drive out of the promised land when they got there. The territory of the Canaanites is described as extending from Sidon down to Gaza and eastward towards Sodom and Gomorrah. Now the cities of Sodom and Gomorrah Israel knew were destroyed by God's judgment. This genealogy shows that the descendants of Canaan would be the ones that Israel would have the most problem with. These people in general lived up to the curse that Noah pronounced in chapter 9. Shem is introduced as the father of all the children of Eber. Israel is descended from Eber. In fact, the term Hebrew likely comes from this man's name. Well, Moses introduces Shem as the father of all the children of Eber. Eber is the 4th generation removed. So, Shem's line is the one through which Abraham and the Christ eventually come, but Eber is the one where we get the Hebrew name from. Shem's sons include Elam, Asher, which Assyria was named after, Arpachshad, Lud, and Aram. Aram is sometimes the Arameans or the Syrians. It is from Arpachshad that Shelah, who fathered Eber, came. About this time, the events around the Tower of Babel occur. Moses notes that to Eber were born 2 sons, Peleg and Joktan. Peleg's name means division, and Moses notes that in his days the earth was divided. This likely refers to the division of languages that God will make. From Joktan, Peleg's brother, came 13 sons, including Sheba. We may remember the queen of Sheba coming to see Solomon, and Ophir, which was known for its gold. These settled in the Arabian Peninsula and the east. Notice the repeated phrase that occurs in each section: by their clans, their languages, their lands, and their nations. This appears in verses 5, 20, and 31. The emphasis is fairly clear. From 3 men came 70 nations, each with their own language, territory, and culture. This sets the stage for Genesis 11, where we're going to see how and why these languages came to be divided at Babel. The genealogy integrates the different languages, the fact that there are different languages, even though the Tower of Babel comes next. Moses is giving the results first, and then he gives the explanation. What can we learn from this chapter as application? Well, first of all nations come from one source. As we mentioned yesterday, we are all cousins if we go back far enough. Knowing that we are all created in God's image should give us reason to treat everyone, neighbor and stranger alike, with dignity. Second, even as Moses charts what is now history for Israel, we'll see that even as they spread out, God was exercising control on where they went and how long the nations would last. We learned this much later. We learned this much later in Acts 17, verse 26 and 27, when Paul says of God, He made from one man every nation of mankind to live on all the face of the earth, having determined allotted periods and the boundaries of their dwelling place, that they should seek God. Well, we do have free will. God does things beyond our individual will to control the boundaries of nations and times of their existence. People are judged in eternity, but nations are judged in time. All of this is done so that we should seek God, because God wants to be found. Finally, God's blessing flows through Shem's line. From Shem came Eber, the Hebrews, and from that line came Abraham, and from Abraham came Christ. God chose one line through which to bring salvation to all nations. Now, He could have chosen any other line, but He chose this one. And that is God's prerogative. We will see these blessings discussed more in chapter 12. Tomorrow, Lord willing, we'll see the Tower of Babel and understand how these languages and nations came to be divided. Even in genealogies, however, we continue to renew our mind.